This video is sponsored by a French StarCraft 2 community member. Enjoy. Hello friends, in today's video I'm going to be shining a light on my currently favorite Protoss Vs Terran build order. This one is going to absolutely change your Protoss Vs Terran. If you're struggling against Terran, no more after this video. Trust me on that. For the people who've never seen a build order guide before, it's very simple. We usually work by numbers. So if I say a 14 pylon, that means this pylon will go down at 14 supply. Once I have 14 out of 15 supply, I'm going to say, oh, this is a 16 gateway. That means we have 16 supply that we're currently using. And then at that point, I build the gateway. Later on in the game, I prefer using the timer, but very early on, I like using supply numbers. So this was a 14 pylon, 16 gateway, and then we instantly chrono boost our workers as well. This worker then can be rallied onto the gas. So once you're 16 out of 23, the next worker can be rallied onto the Vespene geyser and can start that assimilator instantly. This is always going to be the case with almost any opener in StarCraft 2. So it's a nice trick you can put up your pocket, up your sleeve, in your pocket, or both. Then you have them both. That is completely fine. Our next worker gets rallied down onto the low ground to make sure that there is no eBay block happening. And the moment our assimilator finishes up, we want to put 2 workers into gas. This is very important. Now, after we do that, our next worker gets rallied back onto the minerals to get our full 16 out of 16 saturation in our main base. Once we reach 400 minerals, the worker that was rallied down will construct the nexus, and that same worker will then go out to scout for any potential proxies. So you just go around your base looking for proxy marauders, proxy reapers, and all that type of shenanigans. We're not adding any extra workers past 20. We need a small cut in order to afford our cybernetic score. So that's what we do here. Cybernetic score goes down and we go into mining. We now have full saturation on our minerals and into our 1 gas. At 21 supply, we get our 2nd gas, and the worker that builds the gas can get rallied down onto the low ground, can get sent down onto the low ground, and we'll construct a pylon there. Now, it's important that this pylon is close enough to the ramp so that you can full wall in case you ever need it. You don't want it too far back. You also want it to be in range so you can still warp in, but it's not the biggest of deals if you can't, because usually there's a gateway connected to it. Continue rallying into gas, so we keep 16 workers on the minerals this entire time, and then once your cybernetic score finishes up, we get a stalker, which we chrono boost, we get a warp gate, which we don't chrono boost, and then we will continue worker production and get a battery on the low ground. This should be done at about 2 minutes and 12 seconds, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Then once we continue worker production over here, we chrono boost our nexus a single time to speed up our economy a little bit. After our stalker is finished, we start a sentry. And around the time our nexus finishes up, we want to start sending down workers. So anything that is oversaturating our main base, these 2 extra workers, we want to have just 16 on minerals over here. Now the next move is a little bit special. The moment you hit 96 to 100 gas, you pull 2 workers out of gas and send them onto your low ground to start mining minerals. This is to boost our mineral eco a little bit further. We then add in a Twilight Council at about 2 minutes and 40-ish seconds. And after our sentry finishes up, we use an energy recharge on that sentry, send the hallucinated Phoenix across the map, and start a stalker on the gateway. So that's our 3rd gateway unit. We then want to add in our 2nd gateway onto the low ground. Please build that in the wall. Continue worker production. We're not chronoing anything right now, mainly because we don't have energy. And then we add another gateway, also in the wall. We don't want a full wall, but we want to have the ability to potentially full wall. So the 1st and the 2nd gateway, it's really important that those 2 are finished. Well, especially the 2nd gateway should be finished by the time that warp gate is complete. That is absolutely essential. The moment our Twilight Council finishes up, we start our charge. And then we add, on about 41 supply, a 3rd pylon. Please add this one into your main or in your natural. Don't build it outside. This will be important later on. Just trust me on this for now. 2nd hallucination gets sent out as well, but we'll cover that later. And then we can add a 3rd base at about 3 minutes and 40-ish seconds into the game. This all works out perfectly. The moment we fully saturate minerals on the low ground, we want to start rallying into the gases in the main. If this is too difficult, just take 2 workers, send 1 in this gas, 1 in this gas, and then rally back onto minerals. It can lower the workload a little bit for players that are perhaps a little bit lower level. The moment our warp gates complete and our gateways are done transforming into warp gates, we will warp in 2 stalkers. We send out another hallucination to see if there's any type of Widow Mine drop coming in, and if there's not, then life is good. After the double stalker warp in, we get a pylon in our main base once more, or in our natural. I like to have this one close to my main because it provides me the ability to build stuff later on and maybe do some warp-ins if ever needed over there. Then once our 3rd gateway finishes up, turning into a warp gate, we warp in another stalker. So at this point we have 5 stalkers and 1 sentry, and that should be good enough to deal with most threats. Our follow-up is going to be a robotics facility, a zealot warp in, and then you can either continue warping in zealots or more stalkers, a bit depending on how aggressive your opponent is being and what type of follow-up they are going for. A 3rd gas in the mix as well. And we probably want to add a pylon at this 3rd base. Once it gets closer to finishing up and we really want to probably commit to defending this at some point, it's nice to have a pylon there in case there's going to be a tank marine push hitting that location a little bit later on. Send over the workers the moment you can. At this point, we don't really want to go above 7 stalkers. I even think 7 is quite high. I think 6 stalkers or 5 stalkers. The lower the amount of stalkers you can get away with, the better it is, because that means your follow-up tech is going to be faster. As long as you don't have the confirmation that there are no extra barracks, continue warping in zealots. I like to do 1 round anyway. And the moment you see that the extra barracks are being added, start chrono boosting on all of your Nexi at the same time to really boost that eco. Your Templar Archive should go down at around 5 minutes or so. And then once you have good saturation on your 3rd base, you can start considering adding more gateways. I would always recommend going up to 8 gateways. You can also go up to 6 gateways and try to add in some immortals. But I generally prefer going up to gate. It makes the macro a little bit easier. I personally believe it to be a bit better, but I've seen it both ways, so I'm not going to be super upset if you do it a different way. But I personally prefer 8 gate. You start Storm, you warp in a Templar, and usually after you warp in your 1st or your 2nd Templar, you want to either add in a Prism or a Forge or both at the same time. I like a Prism a lot if my early game was pretty decent. If my early game wasn't as decent, then you could consider, instead of a Prism, maybe getting an Immortal if you're afraid of dying. Add in the Forge as well. And then if you had a very good early game where you hardly took any damage, you can consider taking a 4th base if you see a 3rd base on your opponent's side of the map. From here on out, you're just going to be warping in up to 3 to 4 Templar, the rest Zealots, and that is pretty much our early game. This is an early game build order. We're not going to be covering the rest of the game so much, really just focusing on the first 6 to 7 minutes. If you're capable of executing this as well as I was here, you should be capable of beating pretty much any Terran player up until 6k fairly consistently. This is a very, very powerful build order that can respond to absolutely everything, and this is pretty much the point where we want to get to. Let's zoom into some details. Detail number 1 is the pylon that is not being built as a Reaper wall, but instead in base. Reasons are twofold. Number 1, this saves a little bit of cash. If your worker has to walk all the way to the Reaper wall to build a pylon and a gateway, it's going to cost you some minerals, and that sucks. The second reason, which is really the bigger one, the main reason for me why I go for this, is because for some build order responses, you will require a battery in your main mineral line. If your first pylon is over here, and your second pylon is over here, and then you scout, and you see, hey, I need a battery in my main mineral line, you first need to add a pylon near your main mineral line, and then a battery, adding 18 seconds, because of the pylon build time, onto the response time. That's not great, and certain build orders become really difficult to hold as a result. So the trade-off here basically is saying, hey, a little bit less safety against early Reaper builds, but more safety against things like Hellion drop and things like Cyclone drop later on, because the response against that is going to be easier. Our second little detail is going to be the scouting pattern after we build the Nexus. As we are no scouting with this build, it is important to check around for any potential proxies. Those proxies could be Proxy Reaper, but the one we're most afraid of is probably Proxy Marauder. So what I like to do, if you want to go for the safest approach, you go post-Nexus, and you basically commit this probe to checking all of the surroundings around your base. That means that this probe won't be back in time to build a pylon on the low ground. You will need to use a worker from the main base, the worker that constructs the gas, to use that. This is the safest approach, but it is also the approach that leaves you with the least amount of money. A different thing you could do is to scout one side and then move the probe back so that that probe can still construct the pylon at home. After you construct the pylon, you can then continue scouting a different area. That gives you some vision of 2 areas on the map, but it doesn't give you the full type of scout that I'm getting right now with this probe. Look at this. I'm gonna get the full scout on all the surroundings over here. If there is a proxy marauder nearby within any amount of reasonable distance, I'm going to be finding it and I will be capable of responding against that proxy marauder with this build, okay? But this is a choice that you can make. You can play it more greedy and you can play it less greedy. I would always recommend scouting a little bit around after you get the nexus. So you scout around, then you go back to build the pylon, and then you can decide, hey, do I want to scout more with this probe or do I just want to go back to mining? Don't forget, a probe needs to be down here anyway later on to build a battery. So either way, you're going to lose some mining time on that. I feel like you might as well scout around with it. And it does add a lot of safety to the build. That's why I went for this choice. Moving on to the first hallucination scout. The moment your sentry comes out, you want to recharge this sentry the moment that you can and send out this hallucination. The path you take should always be leading in towards the natural. This way you might catch any extra units that are moving out. And when I say catch, I mean you're not going to kill them, but you can scout them. So here, for example, I'm going to see the fact that there's a hellion over here. Okay, that is real nice. The build that I'm playing against is the hardest build to hold early on, which is the Triple Reaper 2 Hellion. Because we built this pylon into the main base and not at the wall, Reaper Hellion builds can actually be pretty tricky. Luckily, I have a good response against this build as well, so do not worry. The reason why we send this hallucination into the natural is exactly for this reason. Look at this. I arrive and a Hellion pops out. This is the second Hellion of a 2-gas 3 Reaper 2 Hellion opener. I now pretty much have the full confirmation that this is going to be a 3 Reaper 2 Hellion run by. However, I don't know where the Hellions and where the Reapers are gonna go. You could go with 3 Reapers into the main base, you could go with 3 Reaper 2 Hellion in the natural, so I need to split my units. However, I only have 2, maybe 3 units when this arrives. The solution to this problem is very simple. I'm just going to full wall my natural temporarily. So after I see the second Hellion moving out over here, what do? Is I get my third gateway and I'm like, oh, this might actually be an issue. So I like to add an extra gateway in the wall. The reason why I go for a gateway and not a cybernetic source, because a gateway builds a bit longer and I often forget to cancel the building in time. So this is more of like an insurance policy against being dumb. If you think you're really freaking fast, you can add in the cybercore because it gains HP a little bit faster, so it becomes harder to target down. If it gets targeted down, you can just cancel it and you have a sentry for force fields behind it. So here we go. This is against Cure. He plays this build and he's like, let me run in. I'm so much cooler than you. Oh, 2 Hellion doesn't work. Oh no. And then he just starts shooting these buildings. He just doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. I don't want any of the real gateways to really go down. So if I see him so committed to shooting at this stuff, I like to eventually cancel one of these gates myself to kind of help out. Make sure that your sentry is behind so that you can always go for a force field. Imagine he tries to go for a run by right now. I do not want to be caught out, him running in and not capable of force fielding. That is very important. After you cancel this, I would recommend putting the sentry on the low ground, stalkers moving back onto the high ground. The reason for this is if you want to once again go for the run by, you can just force field this area temporarily, and then the 2 stalkers in the main can deal with the Reapers. Your warp gate is now done. You warp in 2 stalkers and ta-da, we're over here. We're in a good position. The moment you properly stop this is also the time to try and send out another hallucination and try to get the third base up as fast as humanly possible. You do notice that this third base is a little bit later when you're playing against this build, but that is fine because he invested a lot of resources into this attack and he really got nothing out of it. So my early game right now is very good. If you're playing against someone that opens with 2 gas and they deal 0 damage, your eco situation generally is going to be great. You have a much faster third base, you have good infrastructure, you have fine tech. So as long as you're not taking damage, life genuinely is quite good. Of course, Terran can have different types of openers. So this time, once again, we're scouting with our first hallucination and we see a command center not done yet. This indicates that it is 2 gas and it's going to be a relatively quick attack out of the Terran that will be factory most of the time plus starport based. So we scout in. what do we see? We see a tech lab. The moment you see a tech lab off of 2 gas and a starport, we always want to add a battery in the main base. The reason for this is because most likely it is going to be a cyclone drop with 4 marines. 90% of the time, and especially if you're playing against Cure, 100% of the time, because it's the build he does the most. So I knew at this point exactly what he was doing. Cyclone drop plus 4 marines. This is why having that pylon near your mineral line is so neat. You don't have to, rush out a pylon and quickly add another battery. You don't have to do any of that stuff. If you're really quick, you might be capable of getting away with it, but imagine there's a little bit of chaos in the game. You're dealing with Reaper Hellion, you see it a little late. Getting that pylon plus battery is really tricky to fit all of that in. So I like getting this pylon here as a result of that. Now, this is going to move across the map. Usually after your first hallucination disappears, you want to send out another hallucination to try and figure out where this medevac is. Is this medevac going to the natural? Is this medevac going to the main base? Often, if you have a hallucination tracking this medevac, they're forced to unload, and that costs them quite a bit of time. So maybe you have 5, 6, 7, 8 extra seconds to respond to it, maybe enabling you to get your next warp in as well. I didn't do this in this particular game because I know that Cure 95% of the time goes into the main base, so I decided to save some energy. But usually you do want to do that. So basically the goal here is to have 2 Stalkers and a Sentry in the main, then you warp 2 Stalkers in the natural, and then with your 3rd gateway that finishes up, wherever you believe that your opponent is going to with the medevac plus Cyclone, that is where you warp in your 3rd Stalker. So if you see your opponent heading into the main base with a hallucination, you warp in your 3rd Stalker here. If you see them going to your natural, you warp your Stalker in over here. If you're not entirely sure, I'd almost always warp my Stalker into the main base because that is the most common location for Terrans to attack. In this case, I also do that. If you have the mental space and you know for certain that they're going to the main base, you can use your 2 Stalkers to push away whatever other forces are on the map and try to take your 3rd base behind this. If your opponent is hitting your natural, try to move your entire army there as fast as humanly possible. So imagine he hits here, push that army back, and then take your 3rd base. Okay, so your 3rd base is going to be a little bit more delayed, but that is okay, because once again, your opponent is on dog water economy right now. It is so freaking terrible. I can't even tell you guys. I have to use a Guardian Shield here to save my Sentry. Don't lose your Sentry, it is a very important unit. This is one of the key things in general in this game, is that you do want to always rescout. So after you stop this push, or if you have the clarity of mind during the push, you use a hallucination to see what the follow-up is going to be. Moving on to our next response against, once more, a 2-gas opener. So we have our first little hallucination going in. Sees that it's a late command center. We're dealing with a Reaper Hellion here in the front. Battery plus Stalker on the low ground, Sentry on the high ground, life is good. And what did we scout over here? We're seeing so far very little. Factory without a tech lab, we see a mine, starport that is done pretty quickly, relatively late reactor. So this is going to be most likely a double or triple mine drop. Most likely a double mine drop. So this is what we're expecting to happen. We want to send our 2nd hallucination across the map ASAP. The reason for this is because we want to track where the medevac is going. Now, I'm going to keep it real for you guys. Sometimes when you send a 2nd hallucination across the map, you fly it in a Widow Mine and you lose it. And that happens. You know, this game that I play here is also not like a perfect scenario. Like, this is a real game and mistakes happen. So this time around, I managed to track it, and that's freaking great for me. I get to see exactly where his medevac is going. He can't deny my vision because he doesn't have Marines with him. If he does, he needs to delay himself moving out. Meanwhile, we should be dealing with this stuff. Let's make sure the Reaper Hellion doesn't come in. And once this hallucination is about to run out, ideally we want to have a new hallucination from our Sentry already on the medevac again. Now, as you can see, I was busy trying not to die, so I'm a little bit late with this hallucination, and that's okay. You can still do this pre-split. 3 Stalkers in the main base, Stalker plus Sentry in the natural. Life generally is going to be fine. Note, I didn't build a battery over here because it's not necessary if there is no tech lab unit. Okay? So I'm just continuing to chase this, and I want to mirror the movement of this medevac with my 3 Stalkers, while also simultaneously making sure that these guys are not getting too much damage in. Now, As always in life, mistakes happen. So in this case, I think he eventually manages to actually kind of fly by and get a little bit of damage. But this is still fine. Whenever you play against 2 gas openers and you lose less than 5 workers, majority of the time, the early game is going to be considered good for the Protoss player. So here, the setup is pretty simple. I clear the mines, or maybe he keeps it in the dead space over here. And we just do the same thing. We build charge behind it. We warp in zealots until we know what is going on. I've lost my sentry in this case, so I'll need to build a new one to get a follow-up scout, which is exactly what I'll do. Build a follow-up sentry, recharge it, follow-up scout. And I keep building zealots this entire time. I'm not adding extra gateways yet. Then the moment I see extra barracks, I can tell myself, hey, this is going to be a more macro-oriented game. It's not going to be a 1-1-1 push. I will now want to add things like extra gateways, maybe even chrono boost a couple of works. So you see I've been saving quite a bit of chrono boost here, maybe a round of chrono boost on the workers, and then kind of take it from there. And then we go into a standard follow-up. Up next, we have a very special build that requires a very special response. So we have our hallucination scout coming in once more. As always, bumpy dumpy dum. What do we see? Reactor on top of the factory. That means a low marine count, and this could either be 4 hellion into proxy starport, or it could be 2 hellion into widow mine drop. Now, the moment we see the lack of a starport here, we can't find the starport, we just want to throw down a battery as soon as we can. That is going to be goal number 1. We need to have that battery ready against this, okay? Absolutely. Our second hallucination should also get sent out ASAP, and we want to chase these 2 hellions, or the 4 hellions, with our hallucination. Make sure that we know exactly where they're going. On top of that, we're going to build a 4th unit. Yes, a 4th unit before Warp Gate finishes up. So we queue up a Stalker, we're delaying our charge, and after our 4th unit, we get our extra pylon. Not before that, afterwards. Okay, this is very, very important because this unit needs to come out ASAP. We want to have as much damage as humanly possible. So this hallucination, ideally they overlap so you can completely see where they're going. They can't stay at home or have their marines attack it because then they'll hit too late. And you just chase wherever the hell these hellions are going to be. You mirror your movement with your main army. You have a battery in both bases. You can start your charge afterwards. And I like full walling the natural. The reason why I like full walling the natural is that very frequently they open up with 4 hellion drop into the main base, and then they have a hellion 5 and 6 going into your natural. Now, if you're dealing with those 4 hellions in your main very well, and then you're happy, 2 hellions run into the natural, kill 7 more workers, that freaking sucks. So you don't have to do this. You can also have a probe on patrol in the wall and then hope that you're fast enough. But I don't trust myself to be quick enough. I just full wall, and I like doing this with a gateway. The reason I do this with a gateway is because it takes 46 seconds to build a gateway. That means you have a lot of time to cancel. You do it with a cybercore, it's 36 seconds. Sometimes it gets a little bit close while you're busy dealing with this threat. You might not be capable of canceling it in time. So just, I like doing this. I think it makes life much, much easier. Now, the way you want to deal with this, ideally, is you shoot at the medevac before it gets to unload. So you kind of move to the edge, and you start shooting at him. That is going to be your general plan. Your next plan here should be to make sure that these hellions come in. Now, I like showing real games rather than theory-crafted games. So here you'll see a real response. So far, it's been going perfect. Then I start throwing down a couple of force fields, which happen to be less than perfect and might actually be, not helping me very much at all. I can't move through anymore with my stalkers very, very easily. And as a result, I still end up losing 6, 7 workers. That is slightly too many. Ideally, against this drop, I lose maybe 3 to 4 workers. It is still a fine position for me. I can now move across the map. I can instantly get a 3rd base, and it's okay. So what I want to do here is I want to get a 3rd base immediately after, cancel the gateway in the wall. And I love moving my entire army across the map. The reason why I love doing this is because very frequently they're flying back home with their starport, especially if they're close to your base, and sometimes you can kill that starport. If you have charge a little bit closer to being done, or you might have 2, 3 zealots, sometimes you can actually deal some serious damage if they skip the bunker as well. So you don't want to commit with this, but you want to see what you kind of can get done. And meanwhile, you should probably be You're just doing your standard stuff. So you're going to get a gas, you're going to get a robotics facility over here as well. But all of that, of course, after your nexus. Don't forget, as long as there's no air units, because the starport is flying, you should not be afraid of anything hitting your base. No Banshees, no Raven, no Medevac, no Liberator. It's just not going to be possible. All right? So we try to clear this starport. He wants to save this starport, and we get a little bit of a fight here. And this is one of these situations where you're probably never going to play this exact same scenario, but I just wanted to show it anyway, just so you can see what it's like in those types of cases. So I'm just kind of standing here, I'm fighting, getting a little bit of a trade. I lose my sentry, not the greatest micro. But overall, this is a fine trade. He keeps his starport alive. I decide not to commit into a bunker because I'm afraid of life. I don't know if a new tank is going to pop out soon, and I just decide to pull back. Templar Archives Robo, and we go back into our standard plan. For the purpose of this build order, we're going to divide Terran builds kind of into two camps. You have the 2 gas build orders and the 1 gas build orders that do marine into factory. We kind of categorize them as the same type of opener. They have much faster factories and can hit you quite hard. Then the second type of opener are going to be builds like marine into reactor and then factory, or Reaper into marine and factory. Both of these builds have a really late factory and thus aren't as much as a threat to us, so we can play a little bit more greedy against that. Now, in this particular game, my opponent Nicorect opened up with a marine into reactor, and this is a pretty slow starport timing. So I scout, I see the starport finish, so I know this is going to be a late build. If you're a little bit too late, not that much of an issue either. And you see the first mine now come out, it's like, oh, this is a very late first mine. That freaking sucks for him. I don't see a tech lab over here, so I don't, once again, need a battery in my main base. I don't give a crap about that. I'm just going to keep my first hallucination patrolling this general area. Make sure that nothing weird can happen, like a hellion run by or a Reaper hellion into my main base. And I send out my second hallucination. I would love to track this medevac plus the 2 mines to see where they're gonna go. The moment the road is safe for me to take, I will once again build my third base. Sometimes if there's nothing here, by the way, this third base can go down way, way faster. In the ideal scenario, you just throw it down, the moment you have the 400 minerals available. But if there are 5 Marines and a Hellion in front of your base, that's obviously not going to be feasible. Don't worry. Don't be like, oh, I have to build my Nexus or Harstem's going to shoot me. I'm not going to come shoot you if your Nexus is a little bit delayed. If there's units there, I'd rather have you play it a little bit safe. Make sure you don't take damage, push them back, then take your Nexus. Okay? Send your hallucination across the map. Ideally, it arrives a little bit earlier than 4 minutes against this type of build order, the second hallucination, and then you just simply track this medevac. Now, the medevac is going to run around. It doesn't like to be tracked, because then you can go find it with your stalkers and your sentries. Try to not lose your hallucination. If you do lose your hallucination, it's not the end of the world. You just have to play it a little bit more safe with your units. I'd recommend going up to 6 or 7 stalkers against this particular thing, and make sure to split them into 2 groups. Do not run across the map like a donkey trying to look for a medevac, because then stuff like this can happen. Okay, I'd rather have you pre-split them. 3 stalkers in the main, or 4 stalkers in the main, 2 3 stalkers plus a sentry in the natural. Be sure to continue worker production behind it, and then just stop it from going in. So despite this relatively poor movement, this hits so extremely late that I already have 7 stalkers out. So I managed to have 3 more stalkers in the main, 2 stalkers on the map, 2 stalkers and a sentry in the natural, and this is completely fine. I deal a little bit of damage, and no real damage to my probe line is being dealt. If he does decide to fly in, the maximum amount of damage he should get is 2 workers. Nothing more. If you're getting more than 2 worker damage, that was a bad early game for you. All right? Even if you end up killing the medevac and the 2 mines. Now that we've dealt with all the very early threats, let's take a look at the follow-up scout. This is the portion of the game where most people either get too greedy or they play too passive. So let's have a look at how we're supposed to approach this situation. We just managed to clear Cure's Marine Cyclone push very easily. It's from one of the earlier games. Oh, look at him. Tail tucked in between his legs. He's sitting at home like a little loser. I scout again, and I see something being researched here. I assume it's Cloak. It can also be fake Cloak. So he starts Interference Matrix, then cancels it later when I go away. However, I also saw a Banshee, so I get the full confirmation that this is indeed Banshee. The moment you see anything being researched here, I love getting a battery in my main base if I don't have one already. So that means that both of my mineral lines are being covered by batteries. That makes dealing with single Banshees significantly easier. A single Banshee cannot shoot through a battery. It can deal a little bit of damage to the probe, and over time it will kill one, but it saves a lot of your probes. It is a small investment. If your opponent opens up with a Raven and goes for the fake cloak and does start interference matrix, which you will cancel later, it's still good to have a battery there. A battery can stop an auto turret from getting too much damage. It makes your defense much, much simpler, and it is 95% of the time is a worthwhile investment. It also helps later on against drops. So really, this is just, it's one of these things that makes life so much easier and cost very little at this portion of the game. So I would always recommend it the moment you see really any type of Starport Tech Lab unit coming out, whether that's a Raven or a Banshee, but especially against Banshee with Cloak, big recommendation from me. All right. Now, what else are we looking for with this hallucination? We want to see if there are extra barracks out and whether these barracks are naked or if they have a tech lab or a reactor. A naked barracks is a barracks without anything attached to it. Naked barracks usually indicate a push that is coming at you real fast because these units are not getting upgraded. That means that your Terran opponent is living in the here and now and wants to clear you as fast as possible. So the moment you see this, I'm like, hey, I'm seeing production from a factory. I'm seeing something being produced from a Starport Tech Lab. I don't see Barracks 2 and 3. I don't see Stim on the way. I don't have to throw down a Templar Archives. I don't have to throw down 5 extra gateways. I need to defend right now. So that means all of my resources are going to go into charge lots. That is why I'm getting charged. I'm just going to be warping as many zealots as I possibly can. And I'm going to keep doing that until I can confirm that extra barracks are coming in or until I can confirm that I've destroyed my opponent's push out. So I see that he's actually moving out on the map with my hallucination as well. You can't always get that information. And all you got to do here is just keep adding zealots. Make sure you don't get supply blocked like I did over here. You can even chrono boost your warp gates if you want to, if you feel like you're struggling getting your units out. And whatever production facility you have at the time, you probably want to use. You have your 3 gateways, you have your robotics facility, so that means that pumping out an Immortal, even if it's not going to be available instantly, is a good call. You just want to spend all of your money into probes and into the production that you already have, okay? That is going to be your main goal. The way that you can hold this, if you have enough energy, you can hallucinate an Archon or you can hallucinate some Zealots. I like hallucinating an Archon because it tends to tank quite a bit, but only do this if you also have enough energy for a Guardian Shield. Guardian Shield is going to be your #1 tool in helping against this type of push. So if you only have, for whatever reason, 100 energy, don't use the hallucination, just save it for a Guardian Shield. Ideally, you want to clear this at once. So if you can, you just run towards it and go for it. If your opponent is starting sieging quite far away and you can't clear it, you can always try to run some zealots around to see if you can pick up reinforcements. Usually that's not necessary. And this is also why adding in Immortals is so darn important because it really boosts your defense. It makes it much, much easier. So if he tries to siege up over here, you just kind of move in. Make sure that your zealots are somewhat within Guardian Shield range, and life generally is going to be good. The moment you run out of Guardian Shield energy, you really want to recharge that sentry so you can keep getting it. That's going to be one of your main goals. You always want to have Guardian Shield because it is probably the biggest leverage that a single unit can have. Now, you push it back and tada, you've done a phenomenal job. Yes, you started your Immortals a little bit late, but you've managed to clear this push. At this point, theoretically, you have won the game. Look at this. There's no second barracks, there's no third barracks, there's no real damage that your opponent can do. Don't celebrate too early and stop building units. Just keep building units, keep building probes, and kind of trickle in the gateways and your follow-up tech while you're making sure that you can't die. Until you get the confirmation scout that this push has come to an end, you are continuing to warp in units, okay? You can still die against the follow-up SCV pool otherwise. When does the push end? The moment the factory and one of these 2 buildings start swapping over. So you see a barracks going onto a tech lab, that means less marine production, right? And they're going to go for stim. You see a factory that's building a reactor, that means no more tank production. You see a starport that is moving over to do something else. That usually means that's the end of the push. They're not going to continue pushing from this point on anymore because they're investing into later game things or into mid-game things. It's not really late game. They're investing into mid-game things. Your position right now is great. I'm 54 workers against 42 SCVs. I have significantly better tech. I have my Templar Archives almost done. I have much better economy. I have a much better army. This game is now officially unlosable. Congratulations, you beat the 8th ranked player in the world if you play this out correctly, which I'm sure I did in this game, right? Okay, our final opener before we go into what to do leading into the mid game is going to be against a barracks into factory into multiple barracks. Because this is kind of a specific scenario. So imagine you're scouting with your little hallucination. Oh, CC is done. Oh, we have a factory. Ooh, we have an extra barracks. Now, this means there's not going to be any air threat. And this also means, as a result, that we won't need any more stalkers. Stalkers do not really have a function here, except they will eat our gas count. They're more expensive mineral-wise, and they probably contribute less to a fight than a zealot ever would. I'd still recommend finishing your second stalker just so you have 3 units. But after the 2 stalkers and the 1 sentry, I would not really recommend adding in anything else, if I'm being quite honest. So what I like to do here is I'm delaying my charge upgrade. So even when my Twilight Council finishes, I do not want to instantly start that, and I just rush out a Nexus. In this case, I can add my pylon over at the 3rd base. I'm not afraid of any type of early pressure. The first thing that your opponent most likely is going to do is hit with stim. Now, as you can see, I'm scouting quite actively. I want to make sure that there's no type of eBay here. If there's no eBay, that usually means a slightly faster timing. If there's an eBay, then they have to wait for the +1. So that timing is going to hit a little bit slower. Sometimes they might even add a late starport as well. Either way, this is just going to be the correct response no matter what. So I'm just scouting around with my second hallucination, making sure everything is A-okay. And from here on out, what I want to do is I want to have pretty much constant zealot production. Constant zealot production. Just make sure that you're not being supply blocked. Don't get supply blocked. Produce zealots, produce workers, and once you have the gas available, add a Templar Archives as soon as humanly possible. And that is really freaking fast. As you can see, about 4 minutes and 5 seconds, I can already afford this Templar Archive. I'm also adding in a 3rd gas just to get a little bit extra going. And whenever I get a warp in available while I'm building workers and while I'm building pylons, I'm just warping in. Whenever I have a little bit of cash left over, after those warp-ins and after building the pylons and after building the probes, I can add in extra gateways. So you can see I just keep adding more and more gateways. The magic number that I found playing against 1 barracks into factory is 5 to 6 gateways. And then continuous zealot warp-ins. That seems to work relatively well for me. I also like to start my storm ASAP and throw a bunch of chrono boost on it and start a Templar the moment that I can. So the way you can kind of use this as well is you add 1 Templar and then you don't use your recharge on it and you just let it naturally gain some energy. That allows you, A, to use more energy on Chrono Boost for your Templar Archives, and also, whenever you warp in a Templar later, you can recharge that one. So it gives you, extra energy overall, which is nice. Here, as you can see, I did not do that accurately, but you can do it if you want. Now, the way that you would approach this particular situation is, what I like to do personally, is go for a Zealot run-by. So you send a couple of Zealots across the map, to kind of force them to push into you a lot quicker. If you're not doing this, something that the Terran player can do is they just kind of sit over here with like 3 tanks, then 4 tanks, they add bunkers, more reinforcements are coming across, and it sucks because it's hard to move in bunkered tank position. So that's why I'm sending out these Zealot run-by. The moment I see my opponent move out with a probe or with a different Zealot, I just run in. They either have to return back home and I can run away, or I can recall and then go for another run-by, or they have to go all in. I at least want to pick off all the reinforcements because that's pretty freaking important to me. So I'm just hiding these guys here, have my little my probe patrolling as well. I'm still building workers. I'm not entirely sure if my opponent is all-inning me, so I'm adding a forge. If you're 100% sure that your opponent is all-inning you, like I'm going to be right about now, especially when I see this, I'm not going to start an upgrade here, or at least I shouldn't start an upgrade here right now. I have my Templar. I want to move out on the map a little bit. So one interesting thing about this push is that your opponent can only stim a single time without major risk. The moment they stim a second time, they've pretty much lost the game already. So if I can move on the map and just throw 1 or 2 storms on his marines, that would be huge. If I can force a stim, that would be huge as well. And I want to do that as far from my base as humanly possible. So it's important to figure out where your opponent is at. In this case, most likely through the middle. You kind of meet up with them, maybe force a siege up, and if you can hit a fat storm, then that's great. Like, this is good enough already. Your Zealot run by is picking off reinforcements over here. You see, I'm just patrolling them as well, just making sure nothing can come by. And my opponent doesn't really know what to do against this. It's like, oh, this freaking sucks. I have to move forward really quickly now. And that means that these Templar are going to be capable of just storming everything. You get a free win. Ta-da! Life is good. That is how you beat this. Let's go back to that game I played against Nico Rect. Remember, with the 2 mines that I barely missed with my move out? Yeah, there my hallucination scouts that he's adding in a second barracks, and we can see this factory already flying over to build a different add-on. This usually indicates that they want to go for a fast 3 racks behind it. That is why in this particular game, I feel very comfortable already adding a much quicker Templar archives, extra gateways, and not warping in as many units. Sometimes, however, it is a bit of a fake and then they start naked marine production, so this is still something you need to keep in mind. You want to rescout as much as humanly possible, or at least as much as you can get away with. You don't want to use all of your chrono boost energy into energy recharge for the sentry, and you also don't want to use all energy recharges on the sentry, but you want to get at least a general gist as to what your opponent is going to be doing. However, seeing a factory or a starport float with your first scout or your second scout is a great indicator that most likely it's going to be this type of setup. A 3-rack setup, stim, combat shield. Usually there's going to be an eBay behind it as well. The moment you see an eBay, like here you see that, that's a huge indicator. eBay has no purpose at all in 1-1-1 pushes and tends to delay them a little bit. So generally people don't want to be building them. In this case, all you really need to do is make sure you don't take any damage. Sometimes the medevac stays in the dead space. That's cool. Just leave some stalkers nearby. Sometimes a raven is going to show up. That's cool. Make sure that you have stalkers, and if you have a battery near a base, that's going to help out in a huge way as well. I do like warping in just 1, 2, or 3 zealots, just a single warp in, just in case your opponent goes for some weird move out. You already have some units ready. Then you go for the rescout, and here I see the complete confirmation, right? Stim, combat shield. I saw a bunch of marines. Saw a marauder here as well. So my goal is just to get Storm out as fast as humanly possible. Gotta be chrono boosting, as you can see, fully on the workers, because I want to boost my eco up to maximum saturation on 3 bases ASAP. I make sure I don't take any damage. You don't have to hide, by the way, the fact that you have Templar. Very often I see Protoss players, when there is Raven harass, when there is a medevac in the dead space, they'll be like, oh, I want to hide the fact that I have Templar. No, don't freaking hide that. If you have a Templar and there's a Raven with 30, 45 energy, freaking go and feedback that bad boy, okay? You don't want it to bother you. If you can clear a medevac with a feedback while it's hovering in your dead space, go ahead and do it. You want to get rid of those threats to make everything more simple when the defense against the 3-1-1 push is gonna hit, all right? So the main goal is to make sure that Storm matches up with the stim timing, and that's going to be the case in this game. So in about 70 seconds from now, my Storm is going to finish, but I can chrono boost it 2 more times. So make that 50 seconds. This stim is about to finish in exactly 50 seconds. So it finishes at the perfect timing. Love to see it. We just continue adding more gateways. I can cut my workers at this point because I'm pretty much full saturation. I can probably add in a fort base as well because I had a good early game. Remember, that's what we discussed in the early portion of the guide. If you have a very good early game very frequently, you can actually get a fort base before your opponent moves out. This puts way more pressure on this initial push out to deal serious damage. If they don't get a cancel on the fort base, or if they don't deal a lot of damage into your main base, you can be in some trouble. This is also a good moment, by the way, to try and spread out some units. Maybe send a Zealot over here. Maybe send a Zealot down here. Maybe a Pylon with a probe patrolling this general area. Just get a vibe as to what your opponent might be doing. And if you lose a Pylon and a probe, that's completely fine. You're way up in workers right now, 58 to 51. You have a third base already mining, and you're going to have a fourth base on the way. As long as you're not taking any major damage, you're going to be fine. Losing 3 Zealots is not major damage anymore at this point, okay? In the early game, maybe it is, but at this point, not really. We have 2,600 minerals a minute. We're mining 600 minerals more than our opponent a minute. We can lose 6 Zealots for free every single minute, and we're still growing faster than our opponent. So that is going to be completely fine, all right? Always place losses in the context of a game. And in this particular game, it is completely fine to do whatever. So the moment your Storm finishes up, you're going to be very strong because all Terran armies at the start consist of mainly Marines. So once you have Storm out, you're going to be impossible to beat. I like having these guys in a prism. The reason why it's so nice to have them in a prism is because if you're out of position to deal with stuff in your main base, you can pick these guys up, fly them with the prism into your main, throw a big couple of Storms in there, and you're going to be just fine. All right, so I see where he's going. And at this point, we're pretty much going into the mid game. This is not really a mid game guide. So this is really all I wanted to cover. I think I covered majority of the scenarios here. I actually think I did cover a majority of the early game scenarios. This build should always be capable of putting you into a decent spot in the early game. If you respond appropriately, I actually think Protoss should almost always be ahead. I think this build right now is a little bit too strong, but that's okay. We're allowed to be a little bit too strong. Yeah, enjoy using storms, enjoy using your zealots, and I hope to see you all next time for more videos on this channel. Thanks so much for watching, and bye-bye.